next question is, where do I save my money so that it's there for me when I want to start taking it out of the account? And if you invest in retirement plans like you're typically told, you cannot predict how much will end up in that account. So when you put your money into retirement plans, within the retirement plan is a basket of stocks and bonds held in a mutual fund. And so in order to look at what our performance of our particular plan will do, we need to understand what the stock market is doing as a whole. So on average, over the last 86 years, since 1929, the stock market, if we look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average, has performed about 6.66%. So over the long haul, we see the stock market generally trends upwards. However, this is a little bit misleading because it really matters when you enter and when you exit. Now, you and I both know that we've seen some spectacular gains in the stock market, and they generate all of this hype, but we've also seen those devastating bottom dropping out losses that just turn your world upside down. And because of that, we can't really predict what's going to happen in the future. And if you just so happen to have your retirement date in a year that the stock market is down, you're in a position where you have no room for recovery. Now, when you are putting your money at risk, you're in a position where you're speculating. You are gambling with what you think is going to happen in the future. And this is very different than compounding your money. So you may be led to believe that if you save money in a retirement plan, that you are saving and compounding interest. However, you could have gains and losses, and it's not the same thing as having a fixed, guaranteed rate of return every single year. Because when you compound interest, you have that beautiful compound interest curve that curves upwards in this exponential growth, and it's very easy to predict what's going to happen next because it's always linear or parabolic, I guess is the word for that. So when you look at the stock market, though, the truth is average rates of return are not your actual rate of return. So when we look historically at a 6% average, that does not mean that your each year return going forward will be 6%. So I want to illustrate something here. If you had an account with $100,000 in that account, and say you lost 50% of your money in 1 year, that account drains down to $50,000. The following year, say you had 100% gain. Now what are we back to? We're back to $100,000. So if we average those 2 years, we had 50,000 negative plus 100,000. So just do the math. Negative 50 plus 100, we're at 50. Divide that by the 2 years, we're at 25% rate of return over those 2 years. But you didn't increase your money, you just ended up with what you started at, $100,000. Your actual rate of return was 0. So what happens is we need to understand what our actual returns are, because average is not a reality and it never really plays out for your money that way. And it takes a much higher gain in order to recover from a loss. The other thing is that most retirement plans are tax deferred. These are qualified plans, things like 401ks, 403bs, and IRAs. Now, these attempt to defer a tax, so you're not paying the tax today. You do end up paying that tax in the future. Now, we do not know the future tax environment. We know that most people would say taxes are probably going up. So if you stayed in the same tax bracket you are today, over time, the government may decide to change the tax structure and you may find yourself in a higher tax bracket. Or you may have higher income and be in a higher tax bracket that way as well. So when somebody finds that they have let's say $1 million in their retirement account, if they land in a 30% tax bracket, they need to recognize that looking at that dollar figure is misleading. The $1 million does not belong to them. They only own $700,000, and $300,000 belongs to the government, who lays claim to that tax-deferred account. So the last thing I want to point out is that when you put your money at risk and you do not have guarantees of growth, but you have possibility for loss, there's a possibility that you could lose all of your money. So in no way are you able to plan because no one can predict the performance of the stock market going forward.